Good evening. My name is W. Calvin Anderson, and I'm so happy. I'm elated, as a matter of fact, because we're starting a new show, Better. And this show is about an extraordinary person in my life and actually a celebrity jazz vocalist, jazz called Melba Joyce. And this show is actually her show, and it's called Melba and Friends. And in it, we're going to her life and her performance life. She's an extraordinary person that touched the life of Louis Armstrong to all jazz vocalists and jazz artists today. She's traveled around the world doing what she does, bringing light, bringing bright moments, hosting this extraordinary new show, Melba and Friends, with my buddy, Mark Lee. Mark Lee is the email address and has an extraordinary background that he was given also through his parents. Mark?
Glad to be here with you and Melba. I'm looking forward to meeting this
Good
extraordinary.
as we embark on this new show called Melba and Friends.
Yep, definitely should be amazing. I'm looking forward to it. Looking forward to learning more about Miss Melba and the great things that she has done in the jazz world. I've definitely got a great interest in the jazz community. My folks having started a jazz radio station when I was a teenager, and I'm far from a teenager now. So definitely looking forward to this great conversation and to us learning a lot about jazz music, about her life, and just entertainment in general as we embark on this journey of learning more about this extraordinary lady that is just doing some truly amazing things, both historically in the past, but also still continuing that legacy even to this day as well.
So without further ado, the diva, Miss Melba Joyce.
Hello.
Hey, Melba, I'm so excited.
Me too.
You know, you're one of my favorite girls, and because you're a performer, you're a master educator, and have touched the lives of young people at Medgar Evers College, as well as, and you've brought the service of your talent across the world. Uh, a few years ago, you were in Germany. You actually USO soldiers in Vietnam. The journey mapping of your life is a jewel and a gemstone.
Thank you so much. Thank
for
you
us to explore. So, Melba and Friends is a treasure for all of us. Good evening.
Good evening. It's my pleasure to be here with you, and thank you so much for all those wonderful things you said about me. I appreciate them very much. I have been busy in my life, and I have been traveling a lot and still going.
But Melba, where did it all begin? I mean, you come from a musical family, and I know. Tell us about your start.
Okay, my father was a big band singer. His name was Melvin Moore, and he was with the Ernie Fields Band out of, and he's in the Oklahoma Jazz Hall of Fame out of Tulsa, Oklahoma. And he sang with, he went to the Apollo. He quit school. His dad had a fit. My grandpa, they tell me he had a fit. But my dad quit school and ran away from home, went to the Apollo to do the amateur hour on Wednesday nights. And he won first place, and Dizzy Gillespie happened to be there. So Dizzy hired him right away. And Gerald Wilson was there. And the last time I talked to Gerald, he was beaming and saying, well, your father didn't have any music, so I wrote him a bunch of charts. So anyway, that's how it started. That's how he started singing at 17 with this big band in his hometown. And so, you know, it kind of goes like, if your dad sings, you sing. And my grandmother sang, and my grandmother studied opera. My mother liked Billie Holiday, so she was doing jazz and popular music. My grandfather did kind of barbershop quartet, you know, stuff. And so everybody sang in the family. My aunt played the piano and sang at church. So anyway, I had a neighbor that lived up the street, and she knew my dad sang. So she was playing the piano, and she says to me, comes across the street, and I was about 5 years old, and she says, Melba, you know, I'm learning to play the piano, and I'd like to play for you and teach you some new songs. So I said, okay. Well, I knew a lot of songs because my grandmother sang, and she was always singing to me and playing the radio, buying lyrics to songs so I could sing along with those songs, making sure that I learned a lot. And my stepfather was a jazz fan, and my mother bought him the Jazz at the Philharmonic, that big LP, you know, $25 LP. And so that's all I ever heard of the house was music. And that's how it all happened.
Tell me, you had the opportunity to meet Louis Armstrong. How did that transpire?
Well, I was in Dallas, and I was a part of a group called the Dallas Jazz Society, and they got free, kind of cheap tickets to his concert. He was playing at the State Fair Music Hall, and so I was sitting up there with a gang of people with the part of the organization in my seat, and all of a sudden I hear this to my left, and this woman's stepping over everybody's feet trying to get to me. She says, Melba, 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 come with me. Says, what is it? She says, you're going to sing with Louis Armstrong tonight. And I was like, I knew she's kind of crazy, you know. So I was just saying, what? She says, come on, we got to run. So anyway, she grabs my hand, and we started running, going toward backstage. And she says, I was talking to him, and I told him about you. So he says, well, let me bring her down and let me meet her. Maybe she can sing with us. So we get backstage, and we were running like I don't know what. And he says, tell me you're a singer. So I said, I do my best. So he says, well, you're going to sing with us tonight. The guys and I are going to do 2 songs, and then we're going to call you out. So I said, okay. He says, what do you want to sing? I said, Misty and C. So he said, okay, we're going to do that. He says, I'll call you out after we do the 2 songs. So that's what I did. And that's how I met him. And when he came back, he says, when the show was over, that part of the show was over, the first set was over, he says, Melba, he says, I really enjoyed you and the crowd loved you. He says, and this is what you're supposed to do as a living. You need to do this as a living. You are a singer. So anyway, I had done a lot of practicing with my friend, a neighbor across the street who saw me walking down the street one day. I was about 5, and she says, I want to teach you these songs. So she says, and they had this big playground. Their father was a Pullman, what do they call it when they work on the trains?
Pullman Port.
Yeah, well, not Pullman Port. He was more than that.
Pullman Port.
Yeah, okay. So anyway,
conductor.
Well, he wasn't a conductor. He worked on the trains. Right. So
right.
So she says they had this big house, and I think their father made a nice salary. And in the backyard, they had all these swings. Of course, they'd outgrown everything because they were like 15, 16. She and a brother who became a doctor, the Larkins in Dallas. And so she says, I want you to come and sing with me. She says, and I'll tell you what I'll do if you do this. You can play in the backyard all you like. You know, they had all these swing toys and sandboxes. And I was thrilled to go back and do that, you know. So I did that and sang with her for a while till I got tired of her because I already knew a lot of stuff as it was. I don't think she thought I knew anything. But I did learn a lot of songs from her, like I'm Always Chasing Rainbows, you know, all those kinds of songs and popular music. And I had a great time with her.
Yeah,
I really did.
Staple.
Yeah, it was. And then my father.
So tell us.
And then my father was on the road, and they came through Dallas, and he asked me if I wanted to go to work with him that night. So I said, sure. So I went to work. We walked to his job where he was working, this dance hall called the Rose Room. It's called the Empire Room now in Dallas. I don't know whether it's still open or not. But anyway, he gets up there, and he introduced me to the whole band. And he gets up there and he sings the first set. And then he came down. I said, that was nice. You know, I enjoyed it. And so he says, you want to sing? So I said, yeah. I'm 5, right? So he takes me up on the stage, and the piano player comes, and we get a key for the song. And I sang, I'm Always Chasing Rainbows. So anyway,
beautiful
the
song.
crowd really enjoyed me. You know, they love kids singing anyway. But anyway, I did that. And so I finished my song, and my dad said, take your bow. So I took the bow, and he said, hand me the mic. And I put the mic behind my back. So he says, you got to give me the mic. So I said, I want to sing again. He says, you can't sing again because I'm at work. So he's really negotiating with me because I'm not going to get this microphone. I'm bitten by now, and I really want to be a singer and thinking that I'm a singer. So anyway, he says, all that shopping we did yesterday. I said, yeah. He says, you're not going to be able to do that if you don't hand me that microphone because I got to go back to work. So we've been shopping and really had a crazy time shopping. So I finally handed him the microphone. We bargained with each other for a minute, but it took a few minutes, but it was all right.
So that's an extraordinary beginning, Mark.
Yeah.
That's an extraordinary beginning. I mean,
just incredible, the things that she's been involved in and the ways that she's gotten involved. I know one of the things that...
Yeah, when I tell everybody that story, they say, you were really making a deal with him, weren't you? Because I really was not going to give him that microphone. I really was planning on singing, had planned my new song what I was going to sing, but I gave it to him. So, and we had so much fun spending money. He just spoiled me when he would come through town,
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
So anyway, that's how it all got started.
And it's still going to this day and everything.
Yeah.
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 So what would be how would you characterize the segments of to now? I mean, what would be did you continue with your father, and then at what point did you go off on your own?
Oh, my dad just went on kept his trip going. They went on the road, back on the road, because they were traveling all the time. And he spent most of his time traveling, I hardly ever saw him. We talked on the phone all times of the night because he'd be all over the world performing. And he was with Billy Bowen and the Butterball Four, and he was with the Inks. He was with one of those groups of the Ink Spots for a while, playing drums and singing. So anyway, then when I went to school in the first grade, they had me singing. Every time I looked around, I was singing something. And just every time at school, even elementary school and middle school and high school, I started singing. I was just singing all the time. I didn't sing in the church choir. Everybody thinks that we start off in the church choir, but I didn't. They sang a lot of anthem kinds of songs, kind of straight songs. So I really would like to have gotten into gospel, even though I never did. But anyway, I just enjoyed singing and sang every time I got a chance.
And you opened for Miles Davis.
Yeah, I was featured
and
with
Freddie Hubbard and the like. Yes.
Yeah, Miles was right after the Watts riots. They had a jazz festival there in Dallas. I mean, they're in California. By this time, I had moved to Los Angeles area. I was living in a place called Altadena, which is right above Pasadena in Southern California. And so I was called for this job because I been singing all over Los Angeles. So the guy says he wanted me to be on this show. So it was Miles Davis, and it wasn't Freddie Hubbard. It was Gene Ammons, and no, Smokey wasn't on that one. I met Smokey earlier in Pasadena. I did a
later on
earlier. I did a show with Smokey, and that's not even how I got with him. I just happened later on in life, like a few years after I met him, sang on the program with him. I met this girl, and she says to me, we're at dinner, and she says, everybody's introducing themselves, and she says, I'm a background singer. Like she was so proud of it, And there are some that feel that way, and I do too. Background singing is really important and relevant. And so anyway, my friend who's played the piano, he says, Melba, Smokey Robinson needs another, some background singers. He had quit the Miracles, and he was looking for background singers. So anyway, he says, and you haven't worked in 6 months. He says, what show business is. So he says, you better come over and get this gig. So he says, I'll introduce you to him. So I said, okay. So I went over and I auditioned for Smokey, sang some of the stuff that he already had recorded. And he liked me. So he hired me right away. And he says, I needed one more girl. He says, because one of the guys in the band was singing background with him, sort of, So I said, okay, I'll find somebody. So I remember that girl saying, I'm a background singer. I couldn't forget her because she was so pleased with herself. And she was a wonderful musician. She read music, and she's working for Disney right now. Wow. But anyway, after all these years, she's still with him and has earned a great living, earned a lot of money. I think she moved to the beach, bought a house at the beach and all that. But anyway, her name was Carmen Twilley. And so we did background for Smokey for a while. And then then I had an offer for a job. I was going to sing with this big band in New York, Mel Lewis, and I've forgotten the other guy's name. But anyway, I thought it was a kind of a special thing, but anybody could go to get that job. And so I decided to go to New York. And so I told Smokey I got kind of restless because it just background singing wasn't challenging enough for me. I was used to being a lead singer. So I had the desire, and I really felt inside that I wanted to be a vocalist, a solo vocalist. So anyway, I met these guys, and they wanted to be my managers, and they arranged for me to do a gig at the Plaza Hotel in New York. And I did that job there and stayed in New York for about 6 weeks. And then before I knew it, I was kind of getting in the mix and everything and meeting people and started working around New York, doing jazz gigs and musicals, and did an off-Broadway show called Money, Men, and Champagne. I starred in that. It's a nice show. Yeah, it's never gotten really a lot of play. But
it's some type of era.
Huh?
It sounded like Sarah Vaughan. The first wife of she was Elizabeth. Were you affiliated with Miles during the time that Liz Taylor, his first wife, was?
I don't know who you're talking about.
Okay, yeah, his first wife was named Elizabeth Taylor, actually. And
Miles Davis?
she was a Dunham dancer. She used to hang out with, it seemed like that this title of that song reminded me of perhaps that era, because it was, My Prince Has Come, it sounds like the kind of genre in terms of the way that they were writing songs and titling them.
Yeah.
Now, one of the things, Miss Melba, they were talking about it and everything, just in general, with Cicely recently passing, was just about how oftentimes musicians are misunderstood. And I know that that's something that even Cicely had said before she passed about Miles, that she wished that more people knew the true Miles that she knew when she married him and everything along those lines. So my question is that something that you feel is a case, that oftentimes we don't give enough of a understanding to our musicians, and particularly our jazz musicians? Because we do know that a lot of times people are very hard on our jazz musicians and the way that they have traveled the world and been treated by society.
Well, society and especially Europe has treat jazz musicians better than America has. America just wasn't sold on jazz. But I don't know whether they're misunderstood. They're just like any other artist, they're different. I realize I'm different, and I just don't argue with anybody about it because I know I am. So, I just have to be myself and do what I can do.
And one of the things you do is that you're a jazz ambassador. And I love that, the fact that you are out there showing people the power of jazz music. And like Calvin had mentioned, my folks started a jazz radio station for exactly that reason. Unfortunately, it's no longer on the air, but they were also big jazz fans, and they didn't see enough jazz music in society. So they were saying that they wanted to see more of that on the radio airwaves. So what are some of the roles that you feel you are able to do as a jazz ambassador, and are you still involved as a jazz ambassador?
No, I think it's a title that you probably keep for the rest of your life. I won that award, and was voted in by all these jazz musicians in New York who were very famous and very popular. And it was a competition. So anyway, it's a very interesting story. I had this guitar player. He and I entered the first round, and then he said, I promised my wife I was not going to leave her because her mother's sick, and I don't want to leave her. And then his mother's sisters, 2 of them got sick, so they took them in. So he sure couldn't leave then. And at the last minute, I found this guitar player named Gary Moore, and we didn't have time to do the audition, so we sat in the car, and he sang with I sang with him. We played the guitar, and then we went right to the audition site on 57th Street near Carnegie Hall. And we auditioned and got the job just like that. This guy was really wonderful. He's really a wonderful guitarist. I don't know where he is now, but we had a wonderful tour. We went to 6 countries: Namibia, Angola, Cameroon, Gabon. I had some people in Ghana that I was very close to, so I went in Nigeria. It was a very, very interesting tour. So basically, what I said to the people I met in Africa is that we brought the music back to you because the blues really came from Africa. You know, there's something called the Mali blues. If you go online and put Mali blues in the site, you can find them. And when they're playing the blues, you hear the nuance of it, and you hear how it was developed into the thing that we know, like B.B. King plays. You could hear, but you could hear it. It's just so unmistakable. And a lot of people don't want to admit that it came from there, but it really did start there. And then it was like the foundation of jazz, and then they evolved into jazz and developed it into this wonderful thing we're enjoying today.
Yep, and not just that.
How many countries have you visited in all over the world? I mean, how many countries?
About 60.
Oh wow!
Yeah,
have you
about
performed
60.
in and visited?
Italy.
60 of them. Wow, that's a whole lot.
And I've been to some of them more than one time. Yeah, so that's been very enjoyable for me. I had a wonderful time.
You were recent.
Hmm?
You were recently in Germany. Tell us about that festival or that experience. You know, was it just
yes, actually,
before COVID? Tell us about that.
Yeah, in Austria, actually, I met this guy. I had this singer that I knew in New York, and he said to me, I said, "I hear you're going to Europe." He said, "Yeah, they want me to come and sing." So his name was I can't think of his name. I wish I could think of it, because when this big movie star, when he was very ill, this big movie star wrote something in the email, sent him a get well message, and he was very, very famous, and he liked him a lot. So he says, so the guy says to me, "I'm going to go over." He says, "You know that anything happens, right?" He says, I'm going to make sure you come over." So I was doing a jazz vesper at a church, and he comes in the door, and this guy is with him, this producer, white guy, and he's Austrian. His name is Paul Zahner. And so he heard me sing, and as soon as he heard me sing, you know, he got up and said, I want you to come to Austria to my festival." So I said, okay. So before I knew it, I was gone. You know, I went to that one. And I went to one before that. I went to Pori in Finland and did one there. And then there's a Finland jazz school. And I met this guy named Nico Millery, who had a big band and played the piano for me while I was in Pori.
What was your repertoire? What was your repertoire when you went to those festivals?
Well, did jazz standards. What do you mean? The names of the songs? The names of the songs?
Yeah, what were some of the classic songs that people might be thinking as being even like a signature Melba song?
Well, My Funny Valentine has been a song that a lot of people like to hear me sing, so I love that. And I was a real Ella Fitzgerald fan when I was a little girl, so I did Smooth Sailing and did the scatting, you know. But I was doing it justice. She did it because I had memorized all her stuff, you know. She's really touched my life deeply. She was really a wonderful. She and Sarah Vaughan and Carmen McRae. They're 3 of my favorites.
Oh, wow. Now, one of the other things that you did, and this is going back in time, was you had the pleasure of performing for the troops in Vietnam. And I was wondering, why did you decide to entertain the troops in Vietnam and how that came about?
Well, somehow I met the honorary mayor of Hollywood, whose name was my memory. It's just going away from me. But the guy who was the honorary mayor of Hollywood had a TV show he did with Westerns. And during the intermission, he'd have the people that were going to go to Vietnam. He was really deeply involved with the USO.
It wasn't
Johnny Grant was his name. He's the honorary mayor.
Burl, was it?
Huh?
Was it Burl?
Johnny Grant.
It wasn't Burl, was Grant.
Yeah, okay. Johnny Grant. And so he said, "I want you to watch. Do you like Westerns?" I said, "Yes." So I watched it for a week. And during the intermission, he would have the people that were going to go to Vietnam. He didn't have one black person, not one Latino, no Asians, nobody, just white people. So I called him on Friday after watching it. I was very disgusted with him, and I said to him, what do you think you're doing?" He said, "Did you watch the shows?" I said, I really enjoy Westerns very much, but I'm trying to figure out, what do you think you're doing?" Because when people don't pay attention to people who are at war, and the music is what uplifts them, I know something's wrong. So I saw his racism, and he says, "What do you mean?" I said, "You didn't have any black people on that show. You had no Mexicans, no Latinos. You had no Asians. I know they're going to a place, Asian country, but I said, I don't understand that. What do you think you're doing?" So I really gave it to him. I just reamed him out about that. He says, "Well, why don't you go?" I said, "Oh, maybe I will." He says, "Well, let me give you the address," and he gave me the address of the USO. And I went there that same week, and it was like they were waiting for me to come in the door because they knew I was going to raise hell. I think they just knew that, because I was always involved in civil rights, and I just couldn't stand for any foolishness. So I said, "How dare you? Do you know how many black men are dying in Vietnam?" He says, "Well, I don't have anything to do with it. I sending them." I says, "But you're a part of this, so you're responsible for it." I said, "I don't understand why you haven't sent anybody black over there." And he said, "Well, they're not volunteering." I said, "What do you mean they're not volunteering?" I said, it's if somebody's not doing what they're supposed to do, there's something you're supposed to do, because you in the power and the position to do that. And if you're going to serve America, you have to serve black men. So anyway, I was really rude to him. So anyway,
A
I
lot of
went,
us.
I
Okay,
went,
go ahead.
and they said to me, Georgie Jessel is going, this Jewish comic, said he's going to go to Vietnam. He wants to take a black woman and a white woman. They said, "I think he would really like you." So I said, "Well, I can meet him." So they said, "Would you go?" I said, "Yeah." So they said, "His ship is leaving before you. His tour is leaving before yours." So I met Georgie Jessel. He took me to Beverly Hills Hotel, showed me off and everything, like it was his girl or something. And I went with him first. And while I was en route to doing all of that, I was choosing my musicians, which I had to do carefully, because it's such a sensitive situation. You have to have people who are not, who are going to be able to do what they're supposed to do. And sure enough, one of my musicians had a really kind of had a nervous breakdown, because he was Vietnam age, but he was not drafted. He didn't have to go. So he was very nervous. I guess he thought they were going to just take him in right away. But it was, we were at wars. This was no joke.
What was the temperament of the soldiers, black or white, while you were there?
Oh, they were all very happy to see me and greeted me very well. And I have 42 pictures I treasure that I was able to preserve. You know,
You've had a reunion
huh?
since then of that few years ago, right?
A reunion?
Was it some sort of celebration that recalled the fact that
Yeah, they had.
on
Well,
behalf of the UFO?
yeah, Veterans Day. What happened was, this guy invited me to come to. He says, "I want you to come to." I think it was North Carolina or something like that. He says, "We're having this thing, and we're having the people to do the show that they did in Vietnam, and I want you to be a part of it." So he told me that in August, and this thing was supposed to happen in February or March. And he called me the beginning of the year and said to me, "Well, Melba, we're not going to be able to put you on the show. There were 1,000 people, and he decided to eliminate me." And I said, "Oh, hell no, you're not going to do that to me." I says, "I'm going to tell the president," because Obama was in then. So, I don't, he just said, "No, we don't have space for you." I said, "Out of 1,000 people, you're going to just omit me." And I did 2 tours. So he just kept saying no. So I told one of my friends who had made one of the veterans. He says, "You met plenty of people over there, and your face was all over the country, and you can do something about this." So he told me, he says, "You call this guy who was this general, was now in charge of the War Department, He says, "You let him know what this guy's doing, and
Yeah.
this will change." And so they said, "Write a letter." So I wrote a letter, but it was very rude, so it wasn't going to go very far. And I had a gig in New York, and the waitress set me at my seat, and then she set two people next to me, and we were talking, and this guy said he worked at the Pentagon, and that's all he did was write letters. He says, when I told him the story, he says, I'll write the letter for you. So he wrote this wonderful letter. He was telling them off, but he wasn't telling them off. And this guy was a really great letter writer. And so one day after I sent that letter off to this general, they wrote me and said, Melba, we want you to, Veterans Day, we want you to be in the Veterans Day parade. And we're going to build a float for you. And so I was in the parade, and I was able to choose the guys that I wanted to. I had met a lot of veterans after I got back to New York. And so they really honored me. They really did something special. It was really wonderful. I wish I had
that's
some.
extraordinary. Now, let me fast forward. You have been a continuous learner. Recently, within the past few years, got a master's at Rutgers. Can you tell about that experience?
Well, show business is up and down. I heard that the guy that just died, who was in Ma Rainey's Black Bottom, what's his name?
Oh, I'm not sure.
He just died. Anyway, his
But-
wife was describing what he used to say about show business. He said it's like a seesaw. It's up and down. It's never the same. Always changing. And sometimes you can go without a job for like 3 months, 6 months, and then you'll work like 6 months and be off again. So anyway, he really did do a good description of it. It is like a seesaw. And so where was I? What was I talking about?
We were talking about the going back to school at Rutgers
Oh,
for the
right.
master's.
Yeah. So anyway, I was with the Basie band, and we were
Great.
in the Count Basie Orchestra. I did a job. I worked with them for 8 years as their vocalist. And my daughter had worked with them first. We sent her off to college, and before we knew it, she's calling home telling us that she was going to go on the road with Count Basie. So who's going to argue with that? We were really proud of that. So anyway, we were at the Hollywood Bowl, and Bill Cosby was there. He did a lot of introductions of all the groups that were there. And I said to Bill, I said, this business is beautiful. I love it. I said, but I'm off so much, and then I'm on. So I got a bachelor's degree, but that's just not enough. I'm going to go back to school, so I better get your contact because I may need your help to go to school. So I called his office and reached secretary there, and so she put me in touch with the foundation that he had, because he had a foundation, Bill Cosby Foundation, and so they gave me a scholarship to help me go to school, and with the other scholarship I got and grants I got.
And your major, tell us about your major, because I know you were working at Stony Brook.
I was working at
in teaching, and then what was your major again, and how did you approach that based on all of your experience?
Jazz history and research. Yeah, well, I had my experience, I think, counted for more than anything. And so this man designed this course, and it was a very nice course. It had everything about jazz in it, and I was very happy to get that degree. And so
how long did it take?
2 years. And I went to school all day. Let's see, 2 days a week, I think. And we were there all day long at school.
Was that a 2-year degree, or 2 years to get it?
Took 2 years, 2 days a week for the whole semester.
And teaching, what were you teaching at Stony Brook?
It's not Stony, it's not Stony.
Old Westbury.
Oh, Westbury, right. I was teaching jazz history and
Old Westbury. I'm sorry.
Yeah, and another course, some other courses, world history, world music history. So I enjoyed that very much. I really did. And then I taught the same thing at Medgar Evers College.
When you look at the approach today of jazz and blues and music that's indigenous to us, it's covered by most universities, and at this point today.
Oh, really? Well, I guess so. To a point, it is. Yeah. But they need to all really acknowledge that the blues started in Africa and on the ships. They had people. They didn't have luggage on the ships, the slave ships, so the people brought the music with them, and it was developed. Well, they went to New Orleans with music, Louisiana, and the blues was very popular there, and the jazz. It went from there, and it's really had a great evolution. It's a wonderful story. And if you have a keen ear, or if you want to listen, you can really tell. That it's really one music. I know in one interview I heard a musician say, "We didn't separate back then, a long time ago. It was just our music, and it was blues and jazz. It turned into jazz, so it was all the same."
Hmm.
Hmm.
Wow.
Yeah.
Now,
Awesome.
I know a little earlier about the appreciation of jazz in Europe versus America. When I was in Prague, I noticed that at around the town, the city, from the bridge, the Charles Bridge, to many other places, every other footstep in a public place was classical. Such an amazing appreciation of jazz and African American and Black music that I thought that because of the World War II soldiers had that we needed to follow up on because they really appreciated our music.
Hmm.
Um, uh, Tell us about that. Your European experience. Did you find more appreciation there than here?
Yes, I did. I really did. And all of the main festivals were in Europe. All the jazz festivals, even though there was some in America. Europe is just filled with jazz festivals. Most of the major countries are, France and Germany and Italy. Uh, I did one. I was with the Count Basie one time, and we did a festival, and I went on, and people really liked me, and so I did my couple of songs, and then started to walk off the stage, and they started screaming and yelling. They don't want me to stop. So the producer says, he comes out and he says, "This is her last song because the next group has to come on. This is the end of this part of the festival. You have to come back tomorrow night." And the French people are so demonstrative. That's I'm putting it mildly. They were so pissed off because they wouldn't change the venue until they started throwing the chairs down and beating them on the walls, and they really carried on. So it was really a compliment for me to see somebody carry on like that about the music.
Certainly, they seem to also pass it down to the young people and the things that they were doing extraordinary as well. So I mean, there was, we wish there was this. You have three generations involved in your family life. Can you tell? Because it seemed to be happening in Europe, but it doesn't happen very often here.
Yeah, well, there are some families, the Heaths, Tootie Heath and Jimmy Heath, and of the Heath brothers. It's like three or four of them who played. And when I was with the Modern Jazz Quartet, uh, Percy, I think it was Percy Heath, the bass player, was with them.
Mhm.
So we do have some families. We do have a couple of families, not a lot though.
Yeah, I would even argue that one of the families of jazz is one that's got some roots here in where I'm at in Durham, which is the Marcellus families. I would argue that they are one of the true jazz families that exist and everything, with Ellis, who recently passed away, unfortunately, of COVID and everything, but definitely
Yeah.
still carrying on that legacy with Branford and Winton and a number of
Mhm.
other people like that. And I'm glad that you mentioned earlier, Melba, about the importance of blues and its African roots, because a lot of times I think that we don't even think about the relevance of even country music. I mean, one of their main instruments is the banjo, and the banjo
That's
is
right.
actually formulated right there in Africa and everything.
Mhm.
But a lot of times they don't even acknowledge that, even though some of the more modern country singers are starting to acknowledge that. So I was just wondering
Yeah.
if you could even share a little bit of the ties to both jazz and blues to all of the world's music. I would even argue even our hip hop youngsters need to know about the importance of jazz and blues to what they do.
Well, if you ever ask any hip hop people who are educated, they will tell you that their music comes from jazz. Everyone I've ever talked to who is a hip hop person or a rapper, um, they can tell you that it's, we got this. This is jazz. They tell you just like that, and it is. It is. Yeah, the rhythm and the elements like the rhythm and the rhyming of the lyrics and that kind of thing is definitely a part of rap. So
Yeah, there's
jazz.
no doubt about that. Definitely
Mhm.
tied to the rap tied and everything. And even some of the things that go on in rap is directly related. You were talking about
Mhm.
scatting and things of that nature. And sometimes we'll hear either scats or playing the dozens
Yeah.
involved in
Mhm.
hip hop. And that comes
Right,
straight from the jazz environment and everything. So tell,
right.
tell us a bit about when you first discovered scatting. I know you said you were a fan of Ella and what some of the appeal of scatting is for you, because I am a big fan of scat as well.
Yeah, well, Ella and Louis both scattered, and I just enjoyed how she sang those changes. She'd sing through the changes of the song, and it takes somebody with intelligence to do that because it's not a very easy thing to do. You have to know how. You got to have a great ear in the first place to even hear those changes. So it's something to be respected. It really is.
How did you learn to scat, or how did you become first inspired to try it?
Well, like I said, I was inspired by Ella Fitzgerald the first time and Louis Armstrong, and they're just nonsensical phrases, this it's not comedic because it's too serious to be comedic, but it's a very it's a very interesting and very involved process. You have to hear the part of the music that is the foundation of the music.
Initially, it seems like it's rhythm, it's tone, and the substitution of words is still another element. But
Exactly.
what do you think about improvisational, right? Anyway, or is it something where you're following the music to create, a new vocal instrument?
Well, actually, you're not creating a new instrument because you're using the voice, and the voice is the first instrument. But you're really creating another song.
Hmm.
You create another song when you scat because you have to do something different
So
using.
it's melody.
Yeah. Hmm.
So it's melody.
Yeah, definitely melody. One of the
Yeah.
other things I was curious about, and you kind of alluded to it in some of the earlier conversations, but I was just wondering your thoughts about this. Is you definitely talked about the importance of the civil rights movement and just civil rights in general to you as an individual. So I'd love to hear more about your thoughts about civil rights then, as well as civil rights now. And we're even seeing some of our artistic community, including jazz, blues artists, everybody else, stepping out and starting to address civil rights and even using their art form as a means to talk about these issues. But I'd love to hear your thoughts about that.
Yeah. Well, Gil Scott Heron, you know about him. You remember him? He
Yes.
always talked about injustices, and the revolution will not be televised. He said. Of course, we know
Mhm.
what he meant by that. But we have to all be affected as African Americans. We have to be affected because we're the ones who they've been, you brought us to America and then abused us like I don't know what, and all the tragedies that have happened, George Floyd and all the other people who have been massacred, and our teacher had us and when I was taking the master's course, had us to watch. There's a whole section on lynchings,
Mm.
and which was a very prominent thing at one time and still is in another sense, maybe not in the same kind of sense of hanging you from a tree or a post or anything, but people who have just been slain. Even right here in Georgia, we don't know who did it, but 3 Black people have died since I've been here. And
Wow.
one of them was a 12-year-old boy. He was going to play with some of his friends, and he lived with his grandmother. She was raising him. And they found him dead in the woods behind his house. He'd been shot several times. A 12-year-old kid. They still haven't found the person who did that. Neither have they found the ones. There were 2 young black men in their 20s were shot in their beds, 2 brothers. And they haven't found any reason for it. They don't have any motive for it. It's just black men turned up dead. And
Wow.
it's a civil rights issue. And people don't take that seriously enough. And they really need to pay more attention to it. It's really a very serious matter. Racism is alive and well.
Yeah.
in action here in America.
Not just racism, but also sexism. And I know that a lot of times when we think about the music business, we think about the fact of what you women performers have had to go through. And of course, the Me Too generation has definitely impacted by the arts fields of a number of things, whether that's the actors or the singers or a number of others. But I'd love to hear, Melba, some of your thoughts around sexism in the industry, but also about how we can get more jazz in the world, because I know that jazz education is very important to you. It's very important to Calvin, and also important to me. And I sometimes feel that we don't get enough support from the radio market. And I'm actually in radio now. I'm working with a low power radio station, and of course these streaming platforms. But that's not commercial radio. And I'm hoping that, I hate to put it this way, but I'm hoping that COVID is actually opening up the music business, and that we're seeing a democratization of the music business to some degree. But I was wondering your thoughts.
Well, you know, I'm living in Georgia now, and they have more cool jazz, which is a kind of watered down jazz. It's not as serious as mainstream jazz, because it just takes thought, and it's a deeper thing in music. The chord structures and those things. You just can't just play anything. You have to really think about what you're playing. And most of the musicians who are very intelligent, like you think about Thelonious Monk and the mind of him, how he was able to make everybody thought he was crazy. But now we find that he's a genius. And Miles Davis and just all of those people of that genre, of this genre, and that seriousness.
Fluidity of John Coltrane.
Mm-hmm.
Talk about the fluidity of John Coltrane.
Mm-hmm.
You know, as a marvel. When you're in the class with college kids that understand educationally musicology, give us some profiles of what those kids are like approaching the music today.
Well, they did like jazz, and some of them said, you know, in their tests, you know, we want to love jazz the way you do, because clearly I love the music. And I had one little girl who wanted to be a blues singer, you know, and she's pursuing that. You know, I just guide them who to listen to so they can get the feeling of it. And of course, they had already listened to it to a point. But anyway, they all like it. You know, all of my kids like it. I think they had to like it. They knew they better like it.
Time at Old Westbury. Tell us about the program at Old Westbury and the program at Medgar Evers College in Brooklyn. So one in Long Island, New York, and
one in Brooklyn. Yeah. Well, the
other one was in Brooklyn. But tell us about you were a treasure in, or a gemstone in.
Well, I was a jazz singer. You know, everybody knew that I was a professional jazz singer, and they'd seen my resume, and we did some jazz programs in both the schools, but I think we did more at Medgar than anything. And we just played the music. And then when we had a program, we'd always sing jazz music. I'd always sing it. And they even have a festival at Medgar Evers College, a jazz festival every year in June. And it's wonderful. They have some wonderful musicians there. And it's just very exciting. And Dr. They called it Dr. Mary Umalu Jazz Festival, who was a friend of mine even. She loved jazz, and she was friends with my cousins in D.C. And I remember the kids, they said that they were having a party at the house, at my cousin's house in Silver Spring. And they said they heard a car. It was the night of the party. And they heard somebody drove a truck down behind the house. And so my cousin said, "See who that is out there?" And they came back upstairs. They said, "Oh, it's not Mary. She brought a band." You know, make sure they had jazz music at this party. So it's just.
Which Mary was that again?
Huh?
Which Mary was that again?
Mary Umalu, Dr. Mary Umalu.
Okay.
Yeah, she was
Cool.
very famous. Yeah, she was the heart of Medgar Evers. She really was. She designed some of the art courses.
Today, now we're streaming, and it seemed like there was speakeasies where people would do live recordings and not, and that's how labels would begin. do you think that now that we're in a COVID and we're doing more streaming, that we might be able to do something with this to create more recording?
Yeah, we could do that. As a matter of fact, my daughter made an album right here in her house.
Oh, wow.
Tell us about
Yeah.
Carmen. Tell us about
Yeah, my
Carmen.
daughter Carmen. She said we're like a three generation jazz artist. My dad, like I explained what he did. We sent her off to college, and within about a year, Count Basie came through, and an agent in Austin. They needed an opening act, and he sent Carmen. And when Basie heard her, he says, "Pack your bags." And 9 months later, she was on the road.
What's her full name? Is Carmen?
Carmen Bradford. Yeah.
Yep.
Her father's
Carmen Bradford.
Yes.
Her father's name is Bobby Bradford. He's an avant-garde trumpet player.
Okay,
And
I think I've heard that name before. What are some of the you mentioned earlier about fusion versus straight ahead, and I know that I've even got some friends that are quote unquote smooth jazz lovers and everything. But what do you see as the difference between that, and why do you think that you are so much more a fan of straight ahead than say that avant-garde or pop jazz that exists out there as well?
Well, fusion jazz is a simplification of jazz, whereas mainstream jazz is it takes the real heart of the chord changes and uses very simplified chords and plays with them. That kind of music. Have you ever heard of a piano player named Barry Harris?
I think I've heard of that name. Yeah, definitely.
He's a real great jazz player, and he's based out of New York, and he's just wonderful, and he really explains it and has classes that he gives horn players. When I rehearse, I rehearse with them, the horn players, because I want to hear what they hear. It's
Right.
just a very complex thing. They take a complex chord and really expound on that. And it's a very interesting concept. You really have to hear it being sung. These
I had a friend of mine who's actually a gospel singer, and they actually said something that was similar to what you said earlier in this interview, which was that they have also done background vocals. They actually did background vocals for Gerald Levert and everything. But one of the things that they talked about was that they felt that the best background singers were those that understood the importance of background singing and understood the importance of the job of being a good singer. So they should know all the parts, because you never know when something might happen to the lead singer, and you need to be prepared and everything, no matter what's going on. And I think that that's often what doesn't happen, is that people get so caught up in the thrill of being in the entertainment field that they don't necessarily understand that they need to understand as much as they can. Maybe they can't play all the instruments, maybe they can't sing all the parts, but they need to understand as much as they can in case they need to fill in for somebody. And also, just as you said, it helps you have a better understanding. You may not want to play the horn, but just being able to understand where the horn players are coming from gives you a better understanding of the entire piece.
Yeah, they use substitute chords. That's what the improvisation is so important. You have to know how to use the substitute chords and how to hear them, how to sing them, what to sing with what goes with what. So you do have to have knowledge of that, and that's very important. And of course, it all comes from gospel music too, which is from Africa also. When you hear the harmonies and the blending of the chords there, they're just like they are here. We just brought them right over on that ship with us.
Yeah, we definitely brought those on the ship. What do you think is one of the things that you wish more students of music knew in general? Because I'm sure that there are things that you wish more students of music knew in general. I know we have some great music schools here. North Carolina Central University, Duke University have strong jazz programs, and there are others that are nearby as well. But I was just wondering, when you see people that are studying music, what are some things that you wish that they would concentrate more on that they may not be concentrating on?
Well, that they concentrate on the chordal structures, so they can understand what the music was put together. And when they understand that, it's easier for them to improvise and use substitute notes or chords. So that's what I wish that they would concentrate on.
Gotcha.
The structure of the music.
Yeah, I agree with you. They need to do more of that. And also, what is some advice that you would give somebody like your daughter or somebody else? She's been having a rich career, but what's some advice that you would give to somebody that's saying that they want to be a musician, and in particular, a jazz musician?
Well, what I would advise them to do is to listen to the greats, people who have already made, like Miles Davis and uh, singers like Ella Fitzgerald, horn players like Louis Armstrong, and the Count Basie Orchestra, and Frank Foster as an arranger, people like that who they clearly have given them the roadmap to how to do those things. So if they listen to them, it'll get to them. They will receive it. Listening is a very
Your daughter
important.
tours. Your daughter tours with major orchestras, and can you tell us a little bit about her career?
Yeah, she's. I'm gonna let her tell you about it, but she's. There was a guy who was with the Basie band, and this producer just fell in love with him. He could imitate Louis Armstrong, so he put a show together, and it's Louis Armstrong show really, and they play all of his music, and of course he had Ella Fitzgerald with him, and so Carmen did the Ella Fitzgerald part. She sang that, and with orchestra they'd
Wow.
have like 35-piece orchestras, and traveling all over the place. So she had a lot of great exposure with that.
Now you've been in several. How many countries have you been to? How many countries has she
We've been about the same, about
been to performing?
67, 60 or 70 countries. Yeah.
Wow.
Now,
And
go ahead.
and Melba, you also on a private level to find their voice in this whole discussion and equation. How does how does that actually work with an individual that comes to you to learn to sing and find their voice?
Well, I have a method that I use that I learned from a guy that I studied with in Los Angeles. His name was Giuseppe Balestreri, and it's a voice building. So if you come to me and you can just sing, and you don't have a particular sound, or you don't know that you have a particular sound, these exercises that I give in this voice building class really I don't know, I think I did something wrong. They can study with me for 6 weeks, and I can give them the voice that they'll have the voice by the time they finish. You know, I teach breathing with that, and because breathing is a very important thing. I think I lost you guys,
No, we're still here. No, we're
No,
still here.
I can hear you.
but
Still
you can't
involved in
hear
the
me now.
conversation with you. So definitely engage in the conversation and everything. One of the things I was curious about, and just a quick question for you,
Can you?
Melba, is you have also got your own product as well, not just supporting your daughter, but you've also got your own label. And I'd love to know more about that label, but also how you've branched off into doing other things. Because I know that you're not just a singer, but you've also been involved in the film world. So I'd love to hear how your film involvement happened also.
Yes, well, I just got 2 films that I've done that I care about. And one is called Run for the Dream, the Gail Devers story. And it's actually about Gail Devers and what she went through in her life. Um, and I had a major part in that. And I got that through Rosie Greer. I worked with Rosie Greer. I did a show in LA. And he was the man that he worked for, the producer that he worked for at ABC, had this show. And before I knew it, I was on that show. And Billy Eckstein also had a television show it was stationed out of NBC. So the other one was called Reggie's Prayer. I had um, um, how was it? How did I get that? Reggie's Prayer. I got Rosie Greer got that for me, I think. But Run for the Dream. Somebody else told me about that too. So it's just a word when you hear about a film coming up, and you hear about it because we're in the industry, and There's always somebody doing something like that, more than just singing. And so I followed through on it, and that's how I got both of them.
Cool. And tell us about your record company. I'd love to hear about the record company as well, because I know you have your own record company, and a lot of times people think that they want to start their own record company. So is that something that you would advise more of our independent artists to do, is to create their own?
Yeah, if you know, you don't want to sit around and wait for somebody to give you a company. And I tell you, Betty Carter was the one that guided me to do that. You know, she says, you know, you can do what you want to do and when you want to do it, and sing what you want to sing when you want to sing it, the way you want to sing it, and you don't have anybody telling you what to do. So I think it was a great thing. And it's called Baraka Records. And I named it from a Bible story that I read. It talked about a young king and some people who wanted to take his country. And these people were going to take his country. And he was so upset about it. He didn't know what to do. And so he prayed and he was really distraught. And God said to him, well, just go down there where they want you to go and just be ready to, you know, like you're going to fight. So these people really were going to take the country because they came prepared to take it over. And so they didn't, when they got ready to fight, it's like they started to argue. Two of them started to argue about, you know, it's like you said, say for instance, this is the way the story went. Say for instance, me and Calvin decided, Calvin told me, Melba, I think we want to take this country over. And I said, I don't want to do that. And you said, yes, you do. You come on and do what I want you to do. So, and then I decided I'm going to go with him and we're going to take this country over. Then we have an argument. And Calvin says, well, you know, this is your idea. I said, no, Calvin, it was your idea.
Hold on. Singing twice.
I guess it's going to stop. Okay.
Yeah. Hold on. I just removed one of them.
Mark, what do you think that is? I see you. The host may add you to the broadcast. I don't know what's causing
Okay.
There's some sort of technical glitch going on, because I've actually got Melba coming in twice on the stream, and I don't know where that happened at, but somehow there's a technical glitch going on with StreamYard. So it's actually not with us, it's with StreamYard. But I think we got the core of the interview done, so hopefully that's enough that we can at least get material for Calvin to edit it and to go from there and everything.
There was a lot of there was a lot of breakups in the delivery of all of us. I mean, you guys were stopping and starting the whole time. So
I know you were.
And it could be
Was I?
everything from signal to everything else. Hold on a second, let me end broadcast.
Was I also?
A